going to talk about we're going to be talking about military rail operations, and I have my co-host Paul. Paul, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you great. So, Paul,
I saw you there for a minute.
okay. So, what do you think makes America so enthralled with rail operations?
Well, it goes back to approximately the Civil War, because during the Civil War, Congress in January 31st of 1862 authorized President Lincoln to seize control of the railroads. And from 1862 to 1865, the United States had what was known as the U.S. Military Railroad, and its first commander was Daniel McCallum. And from then on, the railroads have been, in a lot of ways, integral with the United States military. I think everybody's familiar with the famous movie by Disney, The Great Locomotive Chase, and that was during the Civil War, where it wasn't even a military guy; it was a military civilian scout, James Andrews, commandeered the general, and he took it from the Confederates from Chattanooga, Tennessee, to and it was followed by the Confederate engine, the Texas, and it was an 87-mile chase. And I think from then on in, everything kind of sprouted from that. And then after that, railroads first became a really big thing in 1869, when the Transcontinental Railroad, the Golden Spike at Promontory Point, Utah, connected both halves of the country. And the military then used it in the Geronimo campaign from 1885 to 1886. So railroads have been, since at least the Civil War, have been an important function for the U.S. military and the United States.
Yeah, and even in Europe in the 1840s, so like 1846, in I don't know if it was Germany or Prussia or Austria at the time, they were using railroads to move mass amounts of troops to outflank the enemy or to move troops to the front lines.
It's interesting because when the United States got into the Spanish-American War, and that was a war that was kind of unexpected, the United States used the rails to bring the volunteers to the embarkation points, which at the time was in Florida, both in Miami and Key West. So they required the railroads to use people. They trained people in different areas. Like there's an excellent film on it. It was a miniseries by John Milnius called the Rough Riders, and there's several instances in there where the importance of the railroad is shown. And the railroad went through all the towns from, the western United States to the eastern United States, and people would come out and cheer them on. And you're talking right at the turn of the last century. So, they're before television, before radio, and it was a very major influence at that time. Now, what's unique is I remember reading a book called The Great Pursuit, and this is even prior to World War I. We had what they called the punitive expedition in 1916 to get Pancho Villa in Mexico. And the troops were brought down there by rail. And that's considered to be the first modern military action, because we used Stanley steamer vehicles, we used Buick sedans, we used Cadillac sedans, we even used aircraft for the first time in a conflict, and railroads were definitely part of that, because they had to use the railroads to bring the supplies to Mexico. And a lot of times it kicked off from Columbus, New Mexico. Now, to your point about Europe, though, this is kind of interesting because in Europe, the trains were different than what we had. And we had our trains were 30-ton cars, theirs were 10. And they decided they went back to that same law from the Civil War in 1862, and they put into effect the U.S. Railroad Administration, and it was under General Pershing. And the first commander was a director general named Charles, believe it or not, McAdoo. And the problem was the French rails were not capable of handling the American cars. So they had to search for units of people, and they went to people with prior railroad experience that were in the enlisted and the officer ranks, and they actually formed 5 new battalions of rail troops because they had to get the trains to the front. And that's kind of fascinating. And then ever since the Civil War, up until modern times, the military has had its own railroads and rolling stock. It's really unique.
They still do. They absolutely still do.
And to that point too, when you think about it, in World War II, you know, from D-Day on, there was the Germans and also the American Air Corps bombed the rail lines, and there was no railroad from Normandy to Paris. And as the troops advanced, they had to get supplies. So that's the one time when they fell back on a temporary fix where they used trucks. And you'll recall the main unit they called was the Red Ball Express.
Yes.
And they've actually made films about that. But that's the one time where while they were constructing the rails to get, you know, from Paris further, they used trucks as a stopgap measure, and then the rails became important again. So for well over a century, the railroad was vital to the U.S. military existence, both in the United States and in Europe. And it kept on in Korea. Now, the good thing was in Korea, they had a rail division at Fort Eustis, and they activated it now on July 1st, 1950. And by July the 9th, 1950, they had the 8,059 transportation rail services unit set up on July 9th, 1950. And the good thing was we, you know, embarked at that time from Japan, and Japan still had an active rail system because it had been rebuilt after World War II. And they concentrated on their infrastructure, and that helped move troops and supplies to, you know, to go for the ships and everything to then go to Korea.
Well, what's interesting is, like, you're talking about the Red Ball Express, and to put it in perspective, one train, one 100-car train, can move the same amount of men and equipment as 1,000 trucks. So you're talking about the same amount of equipment and manpower, and it only takes 6 men to man that train. So these
the Americans in World War II had a 7-man train consist. So you're right. You could do it with far fewer men and much more economically, faster, and more effective.
So the thing about the rail system in the United States here, and we have an Army Reserve. It's an Army Reserve MOS, Military Operational Specialty, 88, I believe it's 88 uniform. And it's in the transportation series, but it's only in the Army Reserve. They don't keep them on active duty because they figured, well, we don't have a lot of use for them unless we get mobilized. But they were mobilized back in 2001, 2003. And part of what they're mobilized for is to go down to the bases where they're bringing up mass quantities of troops and make sure that the railheads in these bases were ready and that the cars were getting loaded properly, because you're putting tanks and you're putting trucks and you're putting all sorts of vehicles and equipment on there, to get these things out. If they had wanted to do it in using the roads, because Eisenhower had made the interstate system for national defense, and if you wanted to use the roads, trust me, I've been in multiple military convoys, and if you had to move a division of troops on our system, any decent amount of thing, it would take, you would average maybe 10 miles an hour through the whole thing, with all the slinking effect, with all the breakdowns, with all the things that would go wrong. Whereas you could throw that stuff all on one train and haul it clean across country in a day, literally 24 hours. Get it. Well, if it's moving 100 miles an hour, I guess the Chinese say they have one that'll do 180 kilometers an hour, and it's strictly they're military trained for moving military. So I'd believe that when I saw it. I would say that it's probably exaggerated a bit. But yeah, so aside from being essential to national defense, because what good are our troops going to do us in the middle of Fort Hood, Texas, if they're needed overseas? I mean, we could fly them out of there. It would take forever to get all those tanks out of there. But throw them on a rail and get them onto a ship at a port. And as far as I know, there's no port at Fort Hood, Texas.
Right.
So they have. Are you familiar with any of the actual military locomotives?
I am. They traditionally used the civilian ones, but they also had special purpose ones built for it. But they traditionally used the American military, the American civilian ones, because they were in mass production at the time.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of companies don't want to make onesies or twosies of something. They want to gear up. They want to have their assembly line going to make multiple copies of something. So it probably becomes,
and then also the parts interchange, and they're able, the braking system and everything. So it's all connected to that. So they would they would have special purpose built cars sometimes for different equipment, but and that's kind of unique too, civilian wise. I guess Wisconsin Central used to build all their own rail cars on everything. They had their own factory, and they'd use what was typical, but it was their own rail cars that they would build. So that's kind of unique too. So it's not that hard once you're set up and you're lined up for that.
Yeah, I mean, I was researching a bit about the Russians, and they specifically have a lot of military rail cars. And one of the owners, the oligarchs that owns the Russian rail lines now, he has specifically built hospital trains that travel all through the like Siberian area, and these places where people are way out and they don't have access to it, but they still have a railhead moving in, and he'll move those in and provide free services to people. But it's a thing you can move. What was the I think there's a movie, I'm trying to think of it, where they were permanently living on a train that was constantly moving, and they had a whole culture on this train, and it was.
Well, don't forget in the Russian Revolution too.
Oh,
they used the rails, and they had private rail cars, and they had armored tanks on the rail cars too.
Yeah,
in 1917.
Yeah, in 1917. We sent troops over to the Soviet, to the Russia
The American
at the time.
Expeditionary Force, yeah.
So we had two sets of forces. One was in Vladivostok,
and the other didn't it come through Archangel?
The other one was in Archangel, and the guys in Archangel. Oh my God! I was just reading about that. There were some brutal battles there. They were massively outnumbered by the Bolsheviks. They were holding their own. They were fighting the whole time, and the war was over. No, well, this is
Right.
1918. The war was over in the West, right? But these guys are still fighting the Bolsheviks because the Bolsheviks hadn't solidified their power, up in the North because the British were still, concerned about the Bolsheviks, but they were trying to protect all of the equipment that had been dumped at Archangel. There's a ton of
Right.
military equipment there. They didn't want it to fall into the hands, and I guess no one decided that why don't we just blow it up and get out of there? I guess.
Well, don't forget how this concept though even was even expounded upon, because don't forget in the 70s and 80s there was even a push to put our nuclear rockets on rail cars and shift them between locations so that they couldn't be targeted on special railways with bunkers and with decoy trains. So this rail thing is a real thing, and it's been going on for 150, 80 years now. It's incredible,
Yeah. And the troops that landed at Vladivostok, they were there specifically to protect the Trans-Siberian Railroad. All right, so
That's correct.
the first troops that went in there to protect the Trans-Siberian Railroad, this is, learning these little things about history, just through exploring the rails, was a Czech expeditionary force. There was, until the armistice was signed, there was no Czech Republic anymore. There was no Bohemia, right? And then you had established Czechoslovakia, right? And so they sent in, what was it, like 30,000 troops to protect the Trans-Siberian Railroad. And one of the objectives of our expeditionary force, along with the British, was not only to get those Czechs out of there before they had no way, of getting themselves, before they got surrounded, without support, but also to defend the Trans-Siberian Railroad from a surging Japan, who actually was our ally in World War I, but
Correct.
they were moving in to take that Trans-Siberian Railroad and to take parts of Siberia, which probably would have made them a real heavy power
Powerful
in the
country,
area.
yeah.
Just in that one railroad there, just so important to the whole Asian system there, that we after fighting this World War I would send troops there. So but really, so aside from military use, and I know all the uses for it in the military, I think Americans themselves, so I get stopped by a train the other day, and I'm like, oh my God, it's coming out of the yard and it's going real slow. This is going to be forever. So, you just know that you look at your watch and you go, yeah, it makes sense to just go around it right now. But that's the only time I really get kind of ticked off at trains. And everyone else, you love trains. People grow up, they love trains. One of my happiest memories as a kid, when we would go to the Museum of Science and Industry, and they had that whole train setup. What scale was that, Paul?
The first time they had it, but it was unique because, as you know, in 1900, Joshua Lionel kind of like perfected the O gauge, but it was 3-rail. That one was 2-rail. So it was kind of like a big HO train because they didn't want that 3rd rail. And that was the kind of train that was big when I was a kid, and you'd go to the Museum of Science and Industry. Now they've got an HO scale, and they were able to fit more of the Chicagoland area into it, which is why they went to the smaller scale, because HO is considered HO, half of O. So O is like 1/48 scale, but HO is 186. So you can get double the amount of activity on the layout or the train by going with HO.
So, Paul, on your YouTube channel, Paul Berger YouTube channel there, where you have your train set up, what scale are your trains?
Well, I have like 3 different layouts. I've got an HO layout, which is kind of unique because it's HO Lionel. So it goes from the 1950s up into early 60s. Then it goes from the early 70s to the mid 70s. And then it goes to today. So that layout that I have is about 4 feet by 14 feet. And then I have two smaller ones. I've got a 4 by 4 027 or O layout, which is on a table. And then I put a Christmas layout up every year. It's just basically 2.5 feet by 3.5 feet. And I kind of run that, but it takes the place of the tree pretty much in my house now. But yeah, I've got both scales. I also have a small garden railroad that's G, that's a scale up from O. And then actually my dentist, before he retired, gave me his N gauge layout. So I put a little layout on a 2 by 2 styrofoam board that's N gauge. So I pretty much have all the gauges, but my main one is HO, and then at Christmas time, I do the Lionel O gauge.
Do these run on DC or AC?
Well, now the new ones, they're CAN motors. They run on direct current, but they have a rectifier in there. But the original ones, the original 3-rail was AC, and actually it kind of started in Germany by I think it was Bing. You had to have light bulbs on your layout. And as you screwed in more light bulbs, it would draw more power and the train would go faster.
Really?
So you had to screw and unscrew actual light bulbs to make the train go around. But then Lionel did it to where first it was battery operated, but then it was AC, and it was like about 12 to 15 volts, kind of like what your doorbell runs on. And then the modern ones are DC. And they actually, Lionel did something really interesting in 1946. They invented a way to send a DC current through the AC line, and you could have a whistle then.
Okay, so we're gonna take a break now, and when you come back, we're gonna be talking more about military rail operations here on the Chief Guard of the Republic Radio Show with your co-hosts Mike Tooman and Paul Burvitt.
Coming up on 12:30 on this Saturday, and if you want to call the show in the second half, phone lines are always open at 847-931-1410. Keep it right here on this Saturday. We have the Jeff Michaels Show coming up in the 1 o'clock hour, and then Rich on Tech at 2.
Police or whoever's involved, let's have a peaceful solution. I've had enough drama and violence in my life to last a couple lifetimes. Isn't that right, Paul?
That's correct. And as of January, remember, they're justice-impacted individuals.
Justice-impacted individuals, yes. Okay. That's nice. I like...
Sounds like a dental problem to me, but I mean, it's something else,
Justice. Yeah, if only punishments were dental work without anesthesia,
Right.
You could do 10 years, or we can grind out all your teeth without anesthesia. Take your pick. I'll take the 10 years. Thank you. But yeah, so talking about the rail operations, like I said,
I was just going to tell you, we have a phone call now. You're asking
we do?
Yeah.
Okay. So,
I guess we don't have our hand signals down between each other yet.
Can you, put him on. We got a caller, Paul.
I believe we have Larry on the phone here.
Larry.
Hey, Larry.
Yeah. Hey, guys. How you doing?
How you doing, Larry?
Okay, good. Love your show, guys. Do a great job every week. Okay?
Yeah.
I have a question for you guys, okay?
All right, Paul.
National security question, okay?
Okay.
All right, let's say Donald Trump flies you guys in and say, what should we do about Ukraine? We're fighting an 800-mile front. We can't win. We got 60,000 dead Ukrainians. Who knows how many dead Russians? We got a front that's larger than the Germans fought in World War II.
Okay.
It's like going from Boston to Denver. I'll hang up and listen to your answer, okay?
Okay, well, Larry, I don't really want to make this too political of a show. I mean, but national security, you're calling about the Ukraine there?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So as far as it goes with us, I don't think we should have been involved. And my statement has always been that we should not send any foreign aid to any country that's at war in any way, because we're spending our money to kill other people we don't even know, and that money going out is no good. I think if we didn't send all that money out, the body count that you gave would be greatly less, and political options may have been explored before military options were continued. Right. As far as the war as I follow it, and I'm going to give a little bump here for a YouTube page, YouTube channel. It's called Military Summary Channel. All right. And it's put together. I don't know if these guys are Romanian, Bulgarian, Hungarian, or Moldavian, but they put together a show twice a day where they update it on what's the actual tactical events that are happening in the Ukraine, and they discuss it pretty in detail. So if you want to follow them, that's good. They can tell you what's happening. But one of the things that I did notice, because we're talking about rail operations here, is that the Russians are always moving along the rail lines. They are seizing rail lines. They want those rail lines because they know to move their equipment and to move their supplies and logistics, it's a lot quicker and more inexpensive just to use the rail lines. And
they're using the rails to get resupplied from North Korea too.
Oh yeah, well, North Korea is involved now, but only on Russian soil. I had a long discussion with my son, who's on active duty in the military. But like I said, I don't want to be too political on this one. I guess I could be. A lot of people wouldn't agree with. They wouldn't believe what my views are, based on my bona fides out there. My views might not be what you think. So, yeah. So Larry, I want to let everyone know Larry is my first military mentor in the Army. He was the first guy that actually took me under his wing. He got up to the rank of Sergeant Major in the Army Reserve. And tonight at the Wolves game, he is going to be recognized as one of our veterans. So if you're watching the Wolves game, you're going to get to see Larry out there on the ice. And his fellow members of Post 104 are going to be out there cheering him on. Post 104 of the American Legion. So now working full circle on this one, or segueing into this one, is I think rail operations were so important in the World War I and everything, and so important and struck so much into the veterans' hearts that the American Legion, which was one of the first veterans organizations, not the first, there were others before it, but they have a more elite version of the American Legion. So first you join the American Legion, then you have to be asked to join this other organization called the 40 and 8. And at first I was asked to join, and it's all in French. And I'm not very good at the French, the chevaux et hommes, right? So it's like 40 hommes and 8 chevaux, right? And I'm like, oh man, that must have been like, and I look up, I'm like, oh, it's 40 men and 8 horses. I go, maybe that was some foreign legion force that like held out over, overwhelming odds that they held out, and they had glorious, finish and everything. And they named this after it. And it's, I thought it was really cool. So I was thinking all romantic about that. And then I found out that, oh, that's what a French rail car fits. It either fits 40 guys or 8 horses as they took them to the front. Because other than rail, the biggest form of transportation in World War I was horses. They moved supplies, they moved equipment, they moved men, they moved cannon, they moved everything, especially in the muddier things where, the early versions of trucks couldn't get purchased. So they named
Great movie from about 10 years ago, War Horse.
I can't watch that again.
Yeah, that was a really great movie.
It was a great movie, but
sad.
Brutal. Yeah, brutal. I'm like, oh my God, I can't watch that again. Certain movies, The Passion of the Christ, nope, can't watch it again. I mean, great movie, can't watch it again. Another movie that I can't watch again is Black Hawk Down. Yeah. Knowing a lot about that operation and everything, I wasn't there, but I can't. My kids said I was going nuts when I was watching it the first time, and I'm like, nope, not going to watch it again. Great movie, fantastic movie. And I think I could see every frame of it in my mind for the rest of my life, you know. But yeah, so 40 and 8. So they base it on a boxcar, you know. They base this quote elite, you know, by invitation only, and you have to have guys swear for you that you're a great veteran guy and everything. And on boxcar, on real operations, you know. So even for I guess people knew, the troops knew when a rail car came in, there was the mail, there was food, there was more water, there was more ammunition, there were more clothing. You know, you see that, you know that train's coming in. It's a great thing. And on top of that, you know, they had kitchen units where you could bring the train and you get some hot food. You know, you can they had hospital units. So, you know, you're at the front, you know, and it's a, you know, couple hundred miles or 200 miles to get back to a port. You know, you're doing that on a truck, that's going to take you forever. You get in on the train, you're there the next day. It's a smoother ride, and they can take care of you because there's more room to move. There's not a lot of room to move in the back of an ambulance. So, Paul, are you considering building a strictly military train set now?
No, but I have an airport that's got a military section in it. So and it's got tanks and it's got, airplanes and aircraft and missiles. So actually, that was a big thing with Lionel in the 1960s. They went to an interactive train set that shot missiles, had satellites that would fly. So that's a big element. It's half of my train is this airport, which is really a military base also. And I have, 187 scale tanks on there and things like that.
So, hey, one of the things I want to ask people, if you're out there and you're one of the 88 uniforms or the 88 series that handled rail operations, or with I don't know what the Marine numbers are, but the Marines do it too, and I'm sure the Navy has people. Not too sure
the
about
Navy too for the shipyard and everything. They definitely do.
Yeah, if you didn't have the rail units moving that stuff out of the shipyard, it would just stack up until you couldn't land anything else. And what's the point of having it all in one place? It's an easier target. You stack that stuff up, it's billions of dollars worth of equipment and not just that, all the man hours that went into it, and you blow that stuff up at the port. What was the point of getting it over there in the first place?
Right.
So another important thing, like rail operations. And when I was down in Panama, and they got the Panama Canal there, and they were worried that the Panamanians would not be able to maintain the canal. All right. So the Japanese started buying up all the rail lines next to the Panama Canal. And what they were going to do is just unload these mega container ships on the Atlantic side, rail them over, and load them up on the Pacific side rather than push their ships through. And some of their ships couldn't fit through the canal because they're just too big. The canal was built in
around 1900.
Yeah, 1900s, and they didn't imagine something the size of these mega ships back then. So,
in fact, the way our aircraft carriers are designed, they're built so that they can just barely fit through the canal, so that they can transposition the oceans.
Yep, it's a lot quicker and a lot easier to do it that way than to have to go around, Argentina and Chile, and pretty close to Antarctica to get around South America, or to go around the Cape of Good Hope in Africa. It takes a long time when you only want to go 2,000 miles to get from Florida to California, and you have to go 20,000 miles the other direction.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what would really be cool is if someone that was actually activated with one of these units called in and said, "Hey, this is what we did. This is how vital we were to the war effort, and not just the war effort, for national defense efforts." Yeah, if you think, people in the summertime, they see a lot of military convoys traveling on the highways, and people get all worried. Where are we going now? Where are we going now? We're going to war, or there's a problem here. And what it really is, it's the training cycle. So you have your National Guard and your reserve training cycles, usually between June and September, where they're out there going to they're taken from their armories and going to the big military bases. And the time to worry is when you see all the tanks and all these trucks and everything on the rail lines. That's the big move. Although they will test the system by moving a division or a brigade to the National Training Center. So they're going to take their own equipment out there rather than fall in equipment in place, which like what we did in Bosnia. We didn't bring our own equipment to Bosnia. The first group brought their equipment over there and they left it there. And then everyone that replaced them fell in on that equipment, unless it was very special equipment that the unit needed. And I believe the same thing happened in Haiti. Went over there and we just left the equipment there for the next units to fall in on. And I think that started to happen in Iraq and Afghanistan, where the units would go over there, bring their equipment, and when they came back, they would be refitted with newer equipment, better equipment, hopefully. But when you see mass amounts of equipment on the rail lines, they're going somewhere. And because that's the quickest, easiest way to get to a port, is throw it on that rail line, get it to the port. And every military base has got a railhead, and to get in there. So that just keeps when people think that the rail lines are adequate because they've been around for so long, and we have these interstate, and maybe they should spend more money rebuilding the interstate. It's not as efficient fuel-wise, time-wise, and everything else. We have to maintain a good rail system, except for oil. Now, maybe I'd get a little political here. Like, imagine if we had to transport all the potable water, potable water, that's water that people can drink. So there's water that's not fit for human consumption, or you're at your own risk. And then there's water that is fit for human consumption. And a lot of places, there's not enough water. So imagine if we had to transport all that water by tanker cars, by trained tanker cars. When what we do right now is, they have pipelines of water, or we use rivers and then we purify it later. But if we had to move water to some, desert city like Las Vegas, right? And we were just using tanker cars for people to have drinking water. That would not be as efficient as a pipeline. And a pipeline will bring down the price of stuff, right? So there's the but the people that own the rail lines make some money, so they're pushing to keep that going like that. Even though, what was the last rail disaster we really had?
Wasn't there one in Ohio about 2-3 years ago?
Yeah, and that was toxic waste. So
that's correct.
The rail lines are transporting toxic waste. I'm sure they get paid a lot of money to do that, and it just got spilt over there, but, imagine how many trucks it would have taken to transport the same amount of stuff. And when you're talking about, okay, you had one accident with a train, one major spill with a train, and I know there's other ones that aren't as well reported, but compared to all the multiple truck accidents on the highways every year, that's a drop in the bucket, safety-wise. So well, what do you think about the highway spill? Who should have paid to clean that up, and for the people that lived in the area? I'm talking about the Ohio spill.
It should be probably the rail company, right? And they're the ones that were moving it and didn't check on it, so it should be them.
Absolutely. I haven't heard about. Does anyone out there know what actually happened with the people in Palestine, right? Palestine, yeah. Ohio. Anyone from Palestine, Ohio listening out there, give a call in or give a text in, 505-926-1410 for our text number, or our voice number, 847-931-1410. Let us know how things are going. You know, I mean, I would be pretty ticked. You know, I would be nonstop. I'd be, well, I wouldn't be in a hostage situation over it. Maybe, I don't know, you know, it just seems that maybe a corporate entity doesn't have the visibility to actually have some compassion on people. I know some people are, if I lost my home and a lot of precious things there, you know, some things are without price, right? But if they lowballed me in the beginning, yeah, I would be mad to get a cleanup on that. And the railways are not losing money. Not at all. They're making lots of money. It costs money to have something shipped by rail. Now, Amtrak is, I think that's the only one that loses money, right?
Right.
And who runs Amtrak?
The federal government.
I know. I said I wasn't going to get political there, but
Amtrak and post office.
Yes.
Yeah, the two problems there.
Yeah, and I think
I'm waiting on a part for a train I bought for myself for Christmas. Little lights. It came to with 5 miles of my house, and now the post office has sent it to Indianapolis, and it's not going to be here for Christmas. So that should tell you something right there.
Yeah. Well, the reason I think for Amtrak is that they want to maintain, in case you look at these things, you want to maintain an alternate form of transportation for long distances. Not everyone has a car. Not everyone has a car capable of going more than 100 miles at a time. Believe me, I was a teenager. I know that. Like, I hope this gets to 5 miles to work today. But if you don't maintain the passenger thing, you know, and people are using airplanes, and then suddenly the airplanes stop for some reason. Like we stopped them for a couple days after 9/11 when those planes slammed into the buildings and everything, and we wanted to get everything shook down and sure, right? And so you still have a need for transportation of people, and we have that in Amtrak, but I don't think there's enough public interest in transportation to make it viable for a private company to take it over, because I think they would just lose money on it. So, yeah.
They also were exploring a way where you drive your car onto the train and you go to your destination, you have your car, and then your train would bring you and your car back later on.
That's got to be expensive as all get out. You know, I guess if you had a Batmobile or you had the Green Hornet, or what did he call it? The Green Hornet call his car?
Black Beauty.
The Black Beauty, all right? You have the Black Beauty or your Beretta with the gray ghost, you know, and you're not anyone without your car, so you got to bring your car with you. I could see that working out, but I think Batman would have had his own Bat rail car, or
sure he would have.
Bat caboose, or the Bat box car. Yeah, the Bat box car. Robin, bring up the BBC. The BBC is the British Broadcasting System. No, the Bat box car. We're going to move across country with the Batmobile.
Lionel just came out with a Batman train. It's got the searchlight car shows the bat on the wall. Sweet. With the light and everything.
Sweet. Yeah.
Batman
will never lose money. That's why he's a billionaire. No.
That's right.
Yeah.
Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
Wayne Manor.
Wayne Manor. Now, in the actual comic books, was his father a rail baron, one of those grabber rail barons, or what were they into, weapons or pharmaceuticals? Or they never did actually say that.
I think he was just a very wealthy guy in Gotham City.
Yeah, they didn't say what the Wayne Enterprises actually did, but
I don't think it did.
Yeah,
but he was always into philanthropy stuff on the show. He was always at the event that the Joker or the Riddler was going to like destroy.
Yeah, yeah. That's right. Let me see what. There was that one train. Okay, so like we're talking. 1 minute. Yeah, so we're getting close. I think we got a little off subject there, but I enjoyed it. You know, I enjoyed talking about the trains, and that's one of my skill sets from high school is to get the teacher talking off target and on a tangent so no one would learn anything.
One thing I can tell you about model trains and trains, and I remember this when my father, we went to a train show. You can see a grandfather, a father, and a child, and it's something that families do together. And I find out that with model trains, it brings you back to a better time in your childhood, and that's a time you always try to get back. And the trains are the magic that brings it back.
Okay, so next week, same time, same station, same Chief Guard of the Republic time, same Chief Guard of the Republic station, or short CGR. You could check us out on our webpage, cgr.silink.net. So 1410. And next week, we're going to be doing 2 hours. So we'll be doing noon to 2 next week. And we got to find a subject to talk about that'll cover 2 hours. And it'll be a good subject. I think this one was a good one, too.
Have a great
Take
day.
care. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Fact, exciting pulp fiction? Read the works of Michael Tuman, now featuring the international crime thriller, I Married a Bot Madam. Available on Amazon in hardcover, paperback, and Kindle editions. The paperback